Welcome back to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell checking in from North Carolina, and I'm joined by my fellow Coaster101 writer, Kyle Lindner, checking in from Ohio. Kyle, how's it going?
How's it going, Andrew?
And Kyle today is joined by his buddy, Jordan Miles. Jordan, how's it going?
Oh, going great.
Perfect. Well, on this episode of the Coaster101 podcast, we're going to debut kind of a new, what we hope is a recurring segment if people decide to participate. But one of our listeners, his name's Clint, he reached out and he said, I want to get to learn a little bit more about the host or whoever's on the podcast. So we're going to start with this just kind of a generic topic, but get to learn a little bit about more who's on the podcast and kind of what their views are as it relates to coasters. So the question Clint wanted us to ask was, if there was any roller coaster, you got one roller coaster ride left the rest of your life, you could ride any roller coaster currently operating or defunct, what roller coaster would you ride and why? And Kyle, I'll start with you.
All right, we're talking like roller coaster, one last ride, and you never get a ride again?
Correct.
All right, I'm going to go bring back Son of Beast for one last ride with the loop.
Okay.
And one last time because it's painful and I wouldn't want to live after that anyway. So
fair enough. Yeah, I was going to ask the question with the loop or without the loop, and you went ahead and you gave me the answer.
I did. I got to ride it with the loop back in the day once, and it was probably the roughest ride I've ever ridden. But hey, one more time.
And Jordan, you're not what we would call a coaster enthusiast. No offense to you or anything like that.
No, I'm out of my league here.
But if you could pick one roller coaster to ride, the last roller coaster you would ride on, what would it be?
I have no idea. I'm going to go with Kyle's answer too, because he made that sound so much fun.
Fair enough. I love it. Well, if it were me, and the other, our podcast co-hosts Eric and Shane, they're probably going to dunk on me for this one, but it would be Fury 325 at Carowinds. I feel like that's the best roller coaster I've ever ridden. I've said so many good things about it. Obviously, Carowinds is my home park. I'd take a back row, left side of the train ride, probably at night, and that's the way I would do it.
We're not surprised.
I figured you wouldn't be, but it's okay. So this week, we're going to talk to Kyle and Jordan, who both recently visited Kennywood. It was the first of their season pass holder preview days. Is that right, Kyle?
Yeah, so they had a pass holder day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 1 to 8 p.m., and then they opened to the public on Monday.
Well, let's just dive right into it. Kyle, you've been to Hershey Park earlier in the season, so you've got your experience with COVID protocols, but how did it feel to be at a smaller park in the post-COVID world?
The only thing I have to compare it to is Hershey, and you still had the circles on the ground distancing people in the queues, and there was hand sanitizer stations everywhere. I will say, different than Hershey, there wasn't as many around, but better than Hershey did. They had them required before you rode. So on most of the larger coasters, before you got on, they would watch you get your hands sanitized before you got on, which they weren't doing at Hershey. They had them in the exit queue. So a little different, but they're all doing it the best they can.
That's good. And Jordan, again, you're not somebody who frequents theme parks with the regularity of the Coaster101 team, but right. What was it like for you as somebody who is not necessarily familiar with a theme park, kind of experiencing a roller coaster or a theme park rather in the this current global situation?
Yeah, it was definitely different. When we were there weren't very many people there, but you can definitely see how all the protocols and everything they have are going to slow everything down quite a bit. But yeah, but I will say I felt like they were pretty good about making sure that you did actually get hand sanitizer, and it wasn't just sitting there. They actually reminded you as you went up and everything. So
cool. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll dive right into it. Obviously, we are a roller coaster podcast, and Kyle, you told me kind of off air that Steel Curtain was not quite open for the season yet, but you did manage to get your first rides on Skyrocket. And, you and we've both visited that park the last 2 years, once after a visit at Kings Island and once for Media Day last year. And Skyrocket was closed both times. What did you think of Skyrocket?
I was very impressed. I guess in my head it was going to be a good ride, but for some reason I was thinking it was going to be kind of rough. Sometimes those small coasters that, a lot of tight twists and turns kind of whip you around and bruise you up a little bit. And we were both pleasantly surprised with how smooth it was. It's not super fast, but the transitions were perfect, and the launch to the top and then slows you down before you go over. It was a really good ride, and it wasn't something I was expecting, so I was happy with it.
Okay. Of the coasters in the park, how does it stack up?
I mean, I'm a big fan of the old Woodies, and a big fan of Phantom's Revenge. It's not very intense. I would probably ride a lot of the coasters before it, but that doesn't put it down at all. Like, there's not a bad coaster there. I'd probably ride it over Exterminator for sure, but I'd ride any of the Woodies before it.
What about Little Phantom? How do you feel about Skyrocket versus Little Phantom?
There's nothing that compares to Little Phantom. Yeah, better than Little Phantom.
Okay, fair enough. And obviously, the new for 2020 attraction at Kennywood this year is the Old Mill, and it replaced Garfield's Nightmare. Again, Kyle, you and I have a history with Garfield's Nightmare, and
Yeah.
I know our other podcast co-host Eric. He visited the park with us, and we all had really good things to say about Garfield's Nightmare.
Yeah.
But how was the Old Mill different than its predecessor?
They both kind of went with this black light theme, which I guess first we got to kind of talk about the history of the Old Mill to understand why they went that direction and like why it's themed the way it is now. The original Old Mill opened in 1901, and it's still currently the oldest operating dark water ride. And
Wow.
like over its first century of operation, it kind of went through a bunch of different themes and slight track variations, but it's still the same ride, like at its base. And Old Mill originally was like this Western theme with skeletons and wagons and horses, and then they changed it. And in 1992, they actually went back to the Old Mill theme, and it was kind of the same thing with the Old West and the skeletons before turning into Garfield's Nightmare in, I believe, 2004, 2005. And all those previous rides were kind of like animatronics and physical props. And a lot of it was outdoor scenes. So some of the track actually had windows into little corridors where they'd have scenes set up. And then when they turned it into Garfield's Nightmare, it was all enclosed and turned into more of a dark ride with black lights and sound effects and stuff. So they kind of did this perfect merge of all of the old rides with the skeletons and the Old West theme and Garfield with the black lights. So because now you have all of these scenes indoors that are black light, but they also have that Old West theme, which is kind of, you never see an Old West theme in blacklight.
Right.
And so we wrote it the first time and we were like, what just happened?
I was so confused.
So we wrote it again later in the day and kind of really tried to pay attention to the signs in the ride. Each scene has its own sign, and it has like a silent movie type vibe, would you say?
Yeah.
And they're kind of like the upbeat piano music going throughout it. There's no talking, but there's like little white cue cards as you go through, and you kind of have to figure out what the story is. But basically, there's a skeleton dude. His name's Harold, and you're kind of following his little journey of trying to plan a robbery, execute a robbery with his little pet skunk that he uses to hold up banks and stuff. And the last scene is you find out that Harold didn't get free. He's in a jail. So, but there's a lot of ways you can read it, and it's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the scenes inside, was it more animatronic? Was it static? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't screen based, but were the practical sets, were they moving or were they animatronics? What were they?
There was some animatronics. A lot of it was just still images, painted scenes, and they had a lot of 3D props and stuff like the jails and there's bathtubs and outhouses and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And there's small pieces that moved, like spiders dropping down, and I think a couple of the skeletons did move.
Yeah.
But nothing more than that.
Okay, cool. And would you, again, we love Garfield's Nightmare, but would you say that the old mill 1. Or probably 3.0 at this point is a better replacement than what was there before it?
I think for the current audience, it is. I think Garfield had his place back in the day, and I think with like all this retro nostalgia stuff coming back right now, that Kennywood being able to pay homage to their old ride, its predecessor, but still tie in all the modern theming with the black light and everything. It's a good fit right now.
Perfect. Let's talk the rest of the park. You mentioned, again, Steel Curtain. It was not open, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to kind of peek back in the Steelers country area and see if progress had been made on the Steelers country area?
I tried to look, but they have someone, right there where they have the Steelers country sign under Steel Curtain. They had it all roped off.
Got it.
So they weren't letting anyone back there, so I couldn't really tell.
Got it. Okay, what about the other coasters? How were the Woodies? Obviously, Jackrabbit's celebrating its 100th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
Still riding like a dream, I imagine, right?
Oh, unbelievable. I told Jordan we got on here, I was like, you're in for a treat on this one. I said, wait for that double drop. And it was unbelievably smooth. And you would never guess that coaster is 100 years old. Yeah, we kind of did 2 loops around the park, basically. We started at Jackrabbit and went around. Did Jackrabbit and then Racer, which was actually our longest wait of the day at like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not bad at all.
No.
Jordan, did Kyle make you ride in the back seat on Jackrabbit?
I think we did
Yeah,
once.
we did.
Didn't we? Yeah, dirty little dog.
We were in line, and we were the first ones in line, and we headed to the front, and the ride op's like, hey, the back seat's the best run. So we hopped back there. It was awesome.
Coming over that double down in the back seat, that is a moment I will never forget. The first time I did it, just because you're almost standing with the, as you kind of crest that second drop, and it's just like, holy smokes, how does this it was 98 years old when I rode it the first time.
Yeah.
How does it pack this level of punch? It's amazing.
I would still say it's probably my favorite Woody there. Like, even though Thunderbolt's a little longer and still has that play with the landscape, but there's nothing that beats that double down.
How are they doing the social distancing on the rides? Were they doing every other row? How were they enforcing that at all?
Yeah, they were. Every other row, just kind of how we saw it at Hershey Park. And I think some other people on our team have seen it at some of the Cedar Fair parks.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember, but Thunderbolt, you always have to have a partner to ride that.
Right.
So if you come to the park alone right now, you're not going to ride Thunderbolt.
Yeah, because you've got to be with your own party, right?
You got to be with your party. So that was one odd thing that we saw.
What were some, you mentioned a lot of the flats were open. What were some of the rides that weren't open during your visit?
I believe it's Black Widow, their the Frisbee. It wasn't open. Volcano wasn't open. The Witch's Wheel, Enterprise.
Mm-hmm. What about Noah's Ark?
Noah's Ark was not open. I was really hoping to get Jordan on Noah's Ark because I had told him all about
Heard good stories about it.
The wonderful animatronics in Noah's Ark. And
it's Jordan. It is. There is nothing like it anywhere else, especially in America that I've experienced. It is wild.
Just from the outside, I could imagine. Just from seeing it from the outside.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get him back there.
Yeah, when we were there for Media Day last year, I walked through with Kyle and Kyle's son, who's also named Andrew. I'm not making up Kyle's son. He's a person. We just happen to have the same first name. But it got to the point where little Andrew could not take it, and we had to exit stage left out of a back door.
Yeah.
And you know, I can see that, you know, he was what, 3 at the time, Kyle?
Yeah.
So as a 3-year-old, it could get pretty terrifying, and, you know, as an adult, it gets terrifying.
Yeah.
Did you guys did you get a taste of the legendary potato patch fries?
We didn't. We the park was open from 1 until 8, so we got there just after 1, and we hit up the McDonald's outside the park before we went in.
Gotcha.
So we didn't. We got some fried Oreos, which were great.
Yeah. That's good. I do love I love a fried Oreo.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jordan, you got no Noah's Ark, no steel curtain, no potato patch. Kyle owes you a return trip.
Yeah. I want my money back.
Yeah.
There you go. And Jordan, it was your first trip to Kennywood, right?
Yes. Yep.
So again, I'm not trying to harp on the fact that, you know, you don't go to a ton of theme parks like we do.
Yep.
But, you know, what were your impressions, especially in, you know, the year 2020 of Kennywood being a kind of a more classic park?
Right. I mean, I loved it. I'm a baseball guy, and I kind of compare it to the first time I walked into Wrigley Field. You know, you can always kind of feel like you're put back in that time, you know, but still with the modern amenities and all that, you know. But it's just you walk in and you just kind of you feel it, and it's set up well, you know. Just it kind of reminds you of that time. As I really enjoyed that part of it.
Right, very cool. And what was your favorite ride of the day?
Oh, I don't know. I like Jackrabbit. I actually did really like that. That was a fun one.
Any other parting thoughts about your experience at Kennywood, either as a seasoned veteran, Kyle, or a first timer, Jordan?
We rode Phantom's Revenge twice, and it was running better than I've ever run it before. It was a blast, and it was hauling. And that second drop down through Thunderbolt towards the river, you can't get anywhere else, and it kind of rose up my list. It's such a fun ride, and if you're ever there, make sure you get on Phantom's Revenge.
I would say that as someone who doesn't ride a lot of roller coasters, and I was joking with Kyle that I love the twists and turns and loops of roller coasters. It's that big first drop that I don't enjoy the most. But I told Kyle after we were left there that there wasn't a single roller coaster there that I didn't enjoy that we rode. I enjoyed pretty much everything we did. So
I'm going to go back for a quick second. Kyle, you mentioned the roller coaster was hauling, which to me signifies heat. What was the mask policy, and, you know, how was mask enforcement, and what was it like walking around Kennywood with a mask on?
It wasn't as hot as it was at Hershey last week, which was wonderful. And we actually got a little bit of rain, and it kind of cooled it off that afternoon. So it wasn't terrible. But as for like the policy and everything, they were enforcing it on the rides and such. You kind of, if you needed a break, you could kind of pull off to the side and go into like the picnic areas by yourself. There wasn't too many people around. So
they had a spot separated for mask release or whatever.
Yeah, they had like, you know, come over here and sit for 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And
gotcha.
Which was kind of cool. You know, definitely, I mean, they have a lot of kid rides there, and families coming in the summer that'll be nice for them.
Well, are you planning on going back again this year, Kyle? Are you going to take Andrew and see if you can get him through Noah's Ark again?
Oh man, I don't know about this year, but definitely next year. I think he can handle it.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, then you just got to take Jordan in his place then.
Exactly.
That's right. I'll scream and run out the door.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, that about does it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. I want to thank Kyle and Jordan for their time talking about Kennywood. Kennywood is open, I believe, daily now, right, guys?
Yes.
Perfect. And so it's a must do if you're ever in the Pittsburgh area. I've been the last 2 years, and coming from North Carolina, it's not what I would consider to be a regular trip, but it's the type of park that I wish was significantly closer to me. I love that park. I love the ambiance. I love the old coasters. I love the new coasters. And I really just need to ride Skyrocket because if I go there again and it's closed, it's just going to not be I'm not going to be a happy camper on that one. But Kyle, you've got a review of the old mill and Kennywood coming to the site, correct?
We do, yeah. I actually just finished up the old mill one today, so that'll be coming out soon.
Perfect. Well, by the time this posts, that should be on the website, so go check that out at coaster101.com. We're on all forms of social media at coaster101. If you've got any feedback, hate mail, comments, concerns, or have any questions for our new Ask the Podcast segment, feel free to email us at podcast@coaster101.com. Quick shout outs to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music and Nick Paradise at Kennywood for having us out to the Season Pass Older Preview Day. That's it this week, and we will talk to you guys next time.